Hello and welcome to the Eye on the U podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Hurricanes podcast. I'm David Wilson, and I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Susan Miller-Degnan, our Hurricanes beat writer here at the Herald. Susan, Miami takes its first loss of the season, but it sounds like you had a pretty good time in College Station.
Kind of, if you count 1.5 hours sleep and
Good atmosphere at least.
no, the atmosphere was awesome. It was really, really fun. 107,000 people. And yeah, it's a rarity. You don't see that very much. You definitely don't see that at Hard Rock.
It's one of the biggest stadiums in the country, and it was the third largest crowd they'd ever had. So
and largest crowd ever for a non-conference opponent. So it was
Miami brand is strong, even if the haters don't want to admit it. Obviously, to get a crowd like that for a game like that where Texas A&M was coming off a loss and Miami is down at number 25 in the polls now. Probably a little low. Obviously, it's early in the year, but I think we saw a lot of good, a lot of bad from the weekend, right? Some of the concerns we had going into that game and going into the season look like real concerns right now. But some of the things that Mario Cristobal is really preaching as a points of emphasis were really impressive from the weekend. Let's start though with we got to start with the bad because it's kind of the news. We recorded last week before you broke the news that Xavier Restrepo is out indefinitely with a foot injury. What Mario said after the game, at least 6 or probably about 6 weeks.
He said minimum of 6 weeks, which
so
minimum of 6 weeks means
probably more like 8, right? It's going to be a while. Middle of ACC play basically at this point. And then it gets a little worse this week. Jacoby George, who came back from a 2-game suspension against Texas A&M. And I thought looked like he was going to be really useful to this team. He hurts his hand and is going to miss time as well. So Miami is suddenly down to, I think, 7 healthy scholarship wide receivers. One of those is a true freshman, Isaiah Horton. One is Colby Young, a JUCO transfer who's in his first year with the program. Not a whole lot of catches left in that room. We talked about how Restrepo was going to be the clear-cut number 1. Now and in the first 2 games of the year, we didn't see a clear-cut number 2. Now those guys who were competing to just be a reliable number 2 option are going to have to be the number 1. A pretty devastating blow for Miami. You could really feel it on Saturday. A lot of drops from the wide receivers. Michael Redding, who I think had kind of looked like the most reliable option outside of Xavier Restrepo, had a pretty rough game. A couple of drops for him. Keyshawn Smith, who is the big play guy, and I think we had pretty high hopes for him as a big play guy. Those are going to come and go. He's not that complete number 1 guy yet. And Miami's offense, particularly the passing offense, kind of struggled on Saturday, and obviously no touchdowns for them as they go up to Texas A&M. It's a not a great spot for Miami to be in with a couple of weeks until ACC play starts.
No, and we've been saying it really all.
Yeah, it's been since the first practice of camp, right? We were like,
and then all of a sudden, like with a week to go in fall camp, they were getting better apparently, and not too bad. I mean, the first 2 games, and we thought, okay, they're over this. And I think there were 7 actually drops. And I felt bad because, Brashard Smith, on the final drive, Miami has a chance to win, to actually tie the game. They were 8 points down. And I think they got the ball 1st and 10 on the 40 of their own 40. And Brashard has a nice 11-yard catch to start the series, and we're like, okay, they're rolling here. There was only a minute and something left, and but then on the final play, he drops the ball right in his hand. I mean, right alone, or not exactly alone, but
would have gotten a first down.
Should have got, it should have, and it would have been very tough, but they could have. The hope was there, and you got to feel bad for him. And what a way to go down, right? I mean, with all those drops, and I just, well, we'll talk about all the good things they did, all the bad things, but very disappointing.
Yeah, we'll definitely. I mean, I thought there was a lot of good. Both of us were pretty positive, I think, coming out of that game. We'll get to that in the second half. The wide receiver issue, like you said, those first two games, I think Xavier Restrepo is probably not like gonna get drafted, right? He's just doesn't have that profile athletically or size wise. But he looked like a legit, a guy who, when you have a great quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke, his two wide receivers last year didn't get drafted. Like, he looked like a guy who could pretty adequately give you kind of what Mike Harley gave you last year, as that reliable middle of the field. Every once in a while he'll break one. Probably not quite as fast as Harley, but can just be that safety valve. And in the first two games of the year, he looked like every bit of what kind of the team was kind of hyping him up to be in that regard. And then the secondary guys, Redding, I thought was pretty good in game one. Keyshawn Smith obviously caught a touchdown in game two. But they just weren't throwing, they were leaning on the run, and we knew that was going to be a big part of the equation for them this year.
Right.
They had to throw more on Saturday. Obviously, they were trailing pretty much from the jump in that game. Not that they were ever down huge, but you throw more when you're behind. Obviously, maybe your best player on offense is your quarterback. You want him to have the ball in his hands with in big spots. And we didn't see either of those two guys who were kind of flashing as that potential number two guy come through. I still have faith, especially in a guy like Keyshawn Smith, to potentially, Texas A&M is probably, other than maybe Clemson, Texas A&M is probably the best defense they're going to play all year. So it's going to get easier. People talk about what was the run that Tyler had at the end of the year, 300 plus yards and 3+ touchdowns in 5-6 straight games. Those were ACC, not great defenses he was going up against, right? So I think this little, a subpar performance against Texas A&M doesn't mean that the passing game is going to be a mess all year long. But you don't have anyone who you feel is good about Harley or Rambo at this point. And, they'll play Middle Tennessee this weekend, which is they're big favorites, 28-point favorites or something like that.
27,
right, 4 touchdown favorites, basically.
Right.
Kind of another preseason game. Then they got to bye, and then they go into ACC play the following week. They've got to kind of get this figured out. It's probably a good time to be having to figure this out, right? When you get a relatively easy game and a bye, to build some confidence, hopefully, with some of these young guys. But, you kind of only have 2 weeks before the games start to really matter, because obviously now everything is about, there's always the Coastal.
The last chance for the Coastal too. Right? But I don't, about that bye week, I don't love it so early. I mean,
you'd always kind of rather it late in the year when you're more dinged up or whatever. Well, they're kind of dinged up now, but.
And maybe after a good team, but I don't know. In years past, they have not done well, as we've written about a lot, after bye week. So who knows? But they definitely have to get their passing game together. Tyler knows. He seems different. I don't know what it is. We talked to him a couple times. He's always up front, always very frank. I love talking to him because he seems real honest and never cares about what you ask him. I have a feeling they'll have a good game.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said, Middle Tennessee. If I'm them, we've saw in those first 2 games of the year, they've wanted to run it, right? Games against teams you're overmatched opponents. You trust your quarterback. You get the run game going a little bit. I would like to see them flip that a little bit this week. And even if it means that you're not gonna win by 40 points, throw it around a little bit. Let Romello Brinson try to make a couple big catches. Rashard Smith, who you wrote about him on Monday, and obviously the drop that he had at the end of the game. But to me, he obviously started in place of Restrepo. I think in the first 2 weeks, he really popped in those. His snaps were limited because he plays the same position as Restrepo. But to me, he's the guy who is kind of, I think, most interesting because he can be in some ways like what Mike Harley was, where he is not just a middle of the field possession receiver, but he might be the fastest guy on the offense.
Yeah, he takes the ball in the Wildcat.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he runs, can do trick plays and all
But
that.
again, he's a sophomore who hasn't hit adversity, right? It's you ask Mario and a couple of guys about this, just like how do you make sure he responds? And it's going to be really important to make sure that a play like that doesn't linger for him. We haven't gotten to talk to him exactly.
What Mario said is you go out and catch 1,000 balls.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only way you do it. If you're a Hurricane, that's what they believe. And I bet you those kids were out there.
Yeah.
With the jug machines and, going overtime this week. So, and they're going to try to get the tight ends. We talked about.
And we saw Will Mallory had his best game of the year so far on Saturday. I thought he was.
The thing is, David. Yeah, Will Mallory had his best game, but it was 56 yards. He caught 6 catches, which, that's great. 56 yards, and I think he had 48 yards after the catch, which is great too. Yeah. Really good. But they need these guys the leading receiver to catch, to have more than 56
he's not
yards.
Kyle Pitts or Brock Bowers. Like, he's a good tight end, but he's not, at least so far, has not been that tight end who can be the substitute for a number 1 wide receiver.
Right. And I they talked about today, we asked Mario about Jaleel Skinner, and Mario was like, yes, he's doing great and stuff, but he's very slight, skinny, he's tall, 6'5". Mario said he's gotten stronger. He has one catch for 30 yards. Someone's got to come through, basically, whether it's a running back. Even the running backs have dropped the ball. Yeah, drop passes. I mean, so
some of it'll fall on Josh Gaddis too, right? You asked Tyler about, and Gaddis was asked about this too a little bit, but just it's such a different offense than what they were running last year. And
yes,
there's been a lot of positive the run game has been fantastic. We're going to talk about that when we talk about the positives from this game, but they kind of ran the ball down Texas A&M's throat. And they were one of the worst rushing teams in the country last year. So like, Tyler Van Dyke is not going to have to be the player he was last year for Miami to have a good offense. If Tyler was this kind of guy last year, they would have been one of the worst teams in the country. But they just don't need that anymore. But like, clearly, like, there's not as many open guys. There's not, and the thing that stands out to me is, once or twice a game, Brett Lashley would like have a play that just like was an automatic touchdown, right? They did that like play action where Will Mallory would run down the seam and he was wide open every time, pretty much, it felt like, or Jalen Knighton on a wheel route. Like they got to manufacture big plays a little bit more, which I think is that's a real strength of Brett Lashley, who obviously was maybe the best offensive coordinator in the country last year. And Josh Gaddis, that's not the kind of offense that he has run. But obviously a good offensive coordinator can adjust. And I think manufacturing some offense and some easy throws, not just checkdowns and stuff, but easy throws that become touchdowns is something this offense kind of is going to need. The explosive plays have not been there in the same way they were last year. And again, they played Texas A&M, who's better than anyone they'll play pretty much. But Tyler's good at generate a lot of deep, big plays last year, and they haven't done that so far.
And Tyler, this last game, I thought he threw several times into windows way too tight. I mean, there were a lot of oohs and ahs in the press box. No cheering, but a lot of oohs and ahs as far as we thought some of those balls were going to be picked off, honestly. So yeah, I mean, everybody's got to improve in the passing game. That's it.
Switching gears to the positives, because again, we're pretty Miami, what were they, underdogs by the end going in there? 6 points basically. Obviously they don't quite cover, but I think that was kind of the game people expected. I think people expect Miami to score a touchdown.
Yeah, I think we kind of missed that, isn't it? I mean, they, 4 trips to the red zone
Yeah.
and no touchdowns. I mean, that was really the big.
That was the
big
story
thing.
of the game,
Yeah.
essentially. And obviously the
Exactly.
passing game is part of that. When they run the ball 3 times inside the 10 and never let Tyler throw, that is, you could quibble. You could be like, why doesn't Josh Gaddis trust Tyler Van Dyke? But it's also like, why doesn't Josh Gaddis trust his receivers? Because the receivers have not proven themselves. Like there's a lot of components to that. But yeah, I mean, what was the stat? Miami had 27
27 first downs.
first team since at least 2000, which I think as far back as College Football Reference's play index goes. So it's probably even longer, to have 27 first downs and not score a touchdown. So,
Yeah, the 27 first down. I mean, they outrushed the other team. They outpassed the other team as far as yardage by a lot.
They were just terrible in the red zone. It was kind of, I'm a big fan of Bill Connolly from ESPN. For the big games, usually we'll put out these like big graphic charts of like percentages and where that falls in the percentile. And Miami like beat Texas A&M in pretty much every category, except for I think like third down and red zone, which is stuff that you can kind of clean up, right? People say situational football is like a little bit of luck to that. A little bit of just executing better could make a big difference. But yeah, there's pretty much red zone killed them. And that's why I kind of feel positive because, like if you just scored a touchdown on some of those trips, you win by 2 touchdowns. But
I know it's like the bad things were kind of the good things if you turn it inside out.
I mean, the clear positive, I wrote about this on Monday, is like they went out to Texas A&M, which is this big recruiting behemoth, and their lines are filled with behemoths because of it. They've got a ton of 5-star defensive linemen on that team, a ton of blue chip offensive linemen, and we know Miami, although over the last 2 cycles, I think they've recruited a little bit better on the offensive line. We know offensive line is a question. We like this defensive line, but again, it's kind of makeshift defensive line, right? Like you expect in 5 years, and Mario Cristobal has been recruiting, like that defensive line is going to look like a lot, like obviously Akeem Mesidor and all these guys are great, but they're not those 6'6", 270 defensive ends. Despite
and
that,
they're not, and they're not going to be here that long.
Right.
Some of them.
But despite that expected talent gap, Miami, what was it? I don't have the number. I should have pulled this up, but I think 4.8 yards per carry to Texas A&M's 3.9, 12 QB hits and 3 sacks to Texas A&M's 5 and 0. Like they kind of kicked Texas A&M's butt up front, which I don't think. I mean, if you told me that Miami was going to do that, I would definitely have thought they would have won this game.
And they're really going to kick Middle Tennessee's butt.
They might kick everyone's butt in the ACC except Clemson, right? Like that's the good part of this is, the passing game is kind of underwhelming right now, but like if they're just going to be able to bulldoze other teams' defensive lines, like they're going to move the ball up and down the field against everyone in the ACC.
I like Middle Tennessee is, I looked it up, 101st in the nation in passing offense, 104th in rushing offense. They're 98th in sacks allowed, 130th in tackles for loss allowed, and Miami is team sacks. Miami's 27th, tackles for Miami's. I could just see it. They're going to be very hungry this game.
Yeah.
But yes, and what you said. And by the way, another thing to me that was really impressive was with those 107,000 fans, it was so loud, David, and they were really, to me, they were composed. I think
not a whole lot of, I don't have, what were the penalties? It was like not egregious. Yeah. One false start, I think was it.
One false start and then some dumb ones. But I mean,
personal foul. James Williams had one, I think, right? But in terms of like those procedure penalties, delays of game, false starts, both sides, they were clean.
They were really focused. They were really calm. There weren't any fights or anything like that. I mean, their emotions, they kept it in check. It was impressive. I think Tyler took a little too long with the clock management sometimes between plays, but I mean, it was really loud. So he'd go up and put his hand on
Right.
Ja'Kai Clark's back, like however they did it, they did a real Mirabal or Mario did a really good job of preparing them for the noise. I mean, they're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be intimidated now at Clemson or whatever,
No. Yeah, I mean,
They-
that'll be the rowdiest environment they play. I mean, Clemson, I guess even more than
Clemson is-
Clemson probably. Clemson's loud, but
have you been there?
I have. For a
Yeah, it's
really crappy
loud, man.
Syracuse Clemson game.
I've been there for, I think Miami won a long time ago, but they won in like triple overtime. It was like incredible game.
Uh-huh.
Miami won, and it is, the way it's built up,
Yeah.
kind of stadium. It's like this ton of, it's loud there. I do know that, but so that should be kind of fun, that game also.
Mhm.
But they handled this Texas A&M team very well in that respect. I can't, after all that, they only lost by 8.
I know. I mean, they almost, they were down. I mean, they kind of rallied. I mean, it's weird to say rallied when they only scored 9 points, but they like kind of rallied late in that game. I mean, I think it might get forgotten how close they were to recovering a muff punt, like
I know.
inside the 10 there, that would have like totally changed the complexion. And again, like it's, that's another reason that fumble luck it's like a thing, right? Miami muffs a punt and it bounces to Texas A&M. Texas A&M muffs a punt and they recover. Like if those are flipped, then Miami wins that game, obviously. So like, yeah, I mean, it's like, I know like they lost this game and like silver line, like, who cares ultimately, and Miami fans, and that, as they should be, like, the reason it's nice that I tweeted this. It's nice for if I'm a Miami fan, it's nice to be frustrated because you feel like you should have won that game, then be frustrated because you lost by 50 points to Alabama or Clemson and feel like you're like 10 years away from being able to compete.
Yeah,
with the
like
best of the best.
definitely. You walked away from that game and thought, oh, okay, they played okay.
Yeah, like
Miami
that sucks. We should have won. Yeah.
But it was kind of a fun game. So
Yeah, not the most entertaining game in the world, but competitive, obviously.
It was close.
Yeah, competitive. And again, for Miami, I think, like, again, I know like the passing and the offensive issues and maybe some of the conservatism inside the red zone, which Barry Jackson, our colleague, wrote about, are pretty frustrating. And like, long-term outlook, like that's, you thought your passing game is going to be your strength. Doesn't look like that right now. Like that's all frustrating, but at the same time, like ultimately, now that you lost to Texas A&M, like put it behind you. The main goal is to win the Coastal or the AC. Obviously, the main goal now is to win the ACC, but Coastal has to come first. Like what we saw from Miami in terms of what they can do in the trenches, the way the defense has improved. I know Texas A&M's offense has been really, really rough this year, but they basically only give up 10 points. Again, they gifted them a nothing field on that muff punt. Like the defense basically like kind of only responsible for 10 of those points. Like really, I thought pretty impressive stuff from them. Again, against a team that I know is struggling on offense, but the talent they have, their running back is a track and field All-American.
Right.
Aeneas Smith is like a potential American because of like what he can do as a return specialist. And I think, the defensive line looked really good. The linebackers, I don't care that much about PFF grades, but PFF graded those two guys out really well, Caleb Johnson and Corey Flagg. And I know Corey Flagg has had his ups and downs, and DJ Ivey, another guy who's had his ups and downs throughout his career, was fantastic.
Yeah, he really was. He really were like 2 pass breakups in a row, I think, right?
Yeah, and he was good. He was a good tackler. Like, there's a lot of those. Obviously, James Williams, he had the one penalty, but that was like an effort penalty, right? It's like
right.
You'd rather have that than a defensive holding down the field. But he was great. A couple pass breakups too. Like, there's a lot of positives that, again, it's frustrating that you're not on Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, that caliber, but you're like the product you put on the field on Saturday is good enough to win the Coastal Division, certainly. And I know it's a low bar, but it's a bar Miami is not cleared very often.
Yeah, but the thing is, it might be a low bar, but it gets you to a high place,
Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, if they could get to the ACC title game, that's huge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you got to you don't go from 0 to the playoff, right? You gotta hit those marks. And I
Sound
think
like Mario, one game,
one
game
play at a
every
time,
day.
one rep at a time.
One day, just win the day, win the play, whatever.
But so we're I mean, we don't have to dive too much into a Middle Tennessee preview. I think both of us expect Miami to come out and take out some frustrations on them a little bit. I'd like to see them throw the ball around. Like I said, just because I think you got to find some guys, and the more chemistry you can build, the better. Middle Tennessee runs basically an air raid offense.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yep.
It's going to be an interesting test for the secondary, which I think was definitely one of the strengths for Miami on Saturday. Good test for a guy like DJ Ivey, who took a big step forward. And if he and Tyreek Stevenson can keep their play going, Miami's got a really good corner situation. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, I think they'll take their frustrations out this week and get back on track.
I think so, David. Their strength is their defense.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they're very aggressive. It's funny, 19th in passes intercepted in the nation. I mean, it's Middle Tennessee. They play in Conference USA. But their sacks they're way up there. They're 7th in the nation.
They're an aggressive defense. Yeah,
tackles
high
for loss.
TFL. Yep.
And there's another one, red zone. Listen to this.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this to me. Yeah.
This is kind of funny. I'm going to write this in my advance, but their red zone defense is 9th in the nation. Their red zone defense. I mean, again, okay, it's Middle Tennessee, and they've played. They haven't played anybody, but they're still 9th.
Yeah. So some good tests for Miami this weekend. Again, like it's basically a preseason game. But you need, I mean, when you got question marks, you need the preseason to figure out some answers. Then, as you said, they go into the bye week, and then ACC play gets started, and then we're off. Then it's every week, every Saturday, the rest of the way.
Yeah.
With important ACC games, no matter the quality of competition, all of those are important when Miami is going to be favored pretty much every week the rest of the way, except probably against Clemson.
You think we'll see? Jake Garcia this game? I do.
I mean, I don't think they're not gonna like I said, I don't know if they're gonna run it up in the way. I think if they ran the ball on every play, if they ran it, if they did what they did in those first 2 games, they could kind of intentionally run up the score and be like, let's get Jake the 4th quarter. I mean, if this is my thought process, they have questions at wide receiver and in the passing game, let those guys work things out. I would guess we'll see Jake, because I would guess this is going to be a blowout. And he'll get a couple series at the end, but I don't think they're you give Jake Garcia half the game no matter what, right? You wait until you're firmly in control, and then you let the backup get in there.
Yeah, that's what they'll do.
Yeah,
because they do need to get him playing time. So
yeah. All right, I think we can wrap things up there. You can follow Susan on Twitter at @smiller_Degnan. Check out all of her coverage from Texas A&M and leading up to the Middle Tennessee game. You can follow me on Twitter at @DVWilson2. We will both be at Hard Rock Stadium on Saturday to see if Miami can get back on track after their first loss of the Mario Cristobal era. So anyway, thanks as always for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.